The sense you can almost smell Freedom Day, it would appear, next month, July the 19th. More on that in a moment. Now, when we did the review of the morning newspapers, I told you that on the Times, the headlines, pupil face total ban on mobile phone use. Now, this is an attempt, when children are there, of course, because we do have quite a number of children who have to stay at home due to these bubbles being burst, but this is an attempt now to improve discipline and behaviour in schools. And here with more detail, Conservative MP and School Standards Minister Nick Gibb joins me now. Good to see you, Minister. I've not spoken to you for a while. I trust you and all your family are well, so good wishes to you. Spell out what it means, thank you, spell out what it means for the mums and dads and indeed grandparents and the pupils listening right now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, up and down the country, we know that schools have banned mobile phones from the school day, and we want to spread that good practice throughout the school system. So we're asking today a call for evidence on that issue to find out how best to implement that policy, but also other measures to ensure that we are doing everything in our school system to minimise low-level disruption in the classroom. Building on what we've achieved over the last 10 years, we've given more power to teachers and heads to keep control and discipline in the classroom, but we want to go further. We want to eliminate low-level disruption. We want to deal with the scourge of bullying in our schools. Children should be able to go to school feeling safe and content and able to work hard to secure a future for themselves. That's what we want to have in every school in the country, and that's what today is all about.
Do you have an idea, a model for what a child does when he arrives with his or her mobile phone at the class, or are you saying they can't even put it in their bag or their jacket on the route between home and school?
Well, that's what the call for evidence is all about. There are some schools that require it to be stored in a locker when they arrive. There are other schools that trust the children not to take it out of their bags during the school day, and then, of course, it's confiscated if they do. So we'll look at all this evidence. What we do know, what I'm clear about, and have been for a long time, as is the Secretary of State, is that we don't want mobile phones out and distracting pupils during the school day, because they need to be focusing on their lessons. And also, we know that excess use of mobile phones, screen time, can affect children's mental health and their well-being.
So it may be that, would the government actually say that there would have to be lockers or shelves or whatever it might be, or will it be left to a school-by-school basis, Minister?
Well, that's what we're consulting on, and what we tend to do is to produce guidance to schools about how to implement a policy, and then it's for the school to implement. But in producing guidance, we need to go through a consultation process, and that's what's happening at the moment. We're looking at the evidence to see what is the most effective way to advise schools to implement what we do know is an effective way of improving children's attainment. And there are countries like France, for example, that banned mobile phones from schools 2 or 3 years ago, and other countries around the world have done the same.
Two other matters, Minister, on your brief. A lot of my listeners expressed concern when we tackled this yesterday that one child, unfortunately, testing positive in a certain school setting can, in some instances, lead to hundreds being told to go home. And I don't need to tell you that we're talking of millions of lost school days across certainly England. What action can be taken?
Well, of course, it is important that we identify children who have COVID and then identify their contacts and ask them to self-isolate. This is all part of measures across society to minimise the risk of transmission. We're conducting a trial in a number of secondary schools to see whether testing every day, daily contact testing, as an alternative to self-isolation, to see whether that is an effective alternative. That trial ends tomorrow, and we will look at the data to see if that can be an alternative. But it is important that to note that within schools that they've put in place measures to minimise the risk of transmission of the virus. There's extra ventilation, extra hygiene and hand washing, staggered lunch breaks, and so on, and keeping children in bubbles, to do everything we can to minimise the risk of transmission.
You don't think the current system needs to be changed then in any way?
Well, as I said, we've conducted the trial to see whether we can implement a different system to avoid having to self-isolate. But of course, we have to look to make sure that it is effective, and we'll take advice on that when the scientists look at all that data. But it is important that children continue to test themselves twice a week. That's also part of those measures, because again, 1 in 3 people with COVID have no symptoms. So we want to be able to identify any child who has COVID without symptoms, and that's what those twice weekly tests seek to do.
But when your colleague Sir Ian Duncan-Smith says the fact is most adults have either had 1 or 2 jabs, children themselves are more likely to get the flu than get COVID seriously, He's right, isn't he? Why should 350 children be sent home because one child has tested positive? Surely.
Well, we don't want it to be 350 children. That's why those bubbles are carefully chosen.
Well, it is in some instances, I can assure you. That's what
yes,
we're hearing
not
yesterday.
in most instances. I think
Not
the
in
average.
Most, but in some.
The average I've seen, I think, the data I've seen is about 30 will be in a bubble being sent home. And a lot of schools look at the seating plans as well for children to see who has been in contact with that person who has had COVID. But we have as a society, to do everything we can to deal with this pandemic. This is a serious pandemic.
I think we've worked that out, Minister. I think we know
exactly. So we have to take these measures.
You will be aware that millions of lost school days are pretty serious too, of course, Minister.
It is, and education is a priority for the government. That's why we wanted schools to reopen in March, and it's why schools are the last to close and the first to open as we move through the roadmap to recovery. And it's a great achievement that as a country we've got 85% of our adults now having had at least one dose of the vaccine, and 60% have had 2 doses. We want by having this a short extension to July the 19th, it gives us an extra 4 weeks to ensure that more people, more adults over the age of 18 have an opportunity to get the vaccine.
OK, last couple of minutes together. Minister, it has to be said that your colleague, new Health Secretary Sajid Javid, struck a more optimistic or buoyant tone with his performance as first speech as the Health Secretary yesterday. Do you share his level of optimism?
I do, and as does the Prime Minister. We think things are looking good for July the 19th, step 4. We want the roadmap to be an irreversible journey, and that's why they extended the time between step 3 and step 4, just to make sure we have more time for more people to be vaccinated. But I am optimistic about July the 19th. We do want to get back to normal, but we also have to tackle this dreadful virus.
A couple of other matters. Researchers from University College in London said England and Northern Ireland should follow suit with Scotland and ban smacking. Do you agree?
I think these are matters for parents. I think the reasonable chastisement is allowed within the law, and I think it's important that parents are able to bring up their children as they see fit.
So a reasonable tap is permitted in your view?
Well, the law is very clear, and I think obviously parents have to behave reasonably and within the law. But I think I wouldn't go as far as the Scottish government has gone. You
wouldn't see yourself backing a ban on smacking?
No, I wouldn't.
Finally, and I would imagine you've had sight of this, England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, was harassed in the street for the second time in a matter of months. A word or two on that behaviour, Minister.
Well, I've seen those appalling scenes in that video footage. Chris Whitty has been a first-class Chief Medical Officer throughout the pandemic, providing very high-quality advice to government, providing very calm advice to the public in those press conferences. Of course, that has made him a well-known figure, and that makes the behaviour of those yobbos just even worse. All of us should be able to walk through the park, walk in the street, free from that kind of harassment. And I know this is now subject to a police investigation. I hope the full weight of the law and the justice system will fall upon the culprits involved in that scene.
Well, hear to that. Do you think we need to give him some form of protection, and possibly JVT and other high-profile people who've worked in this field, Minister?
Well, that will be a matter for the security services and for Chris Whitty and JVT. But it shouldn't be necessary, Nick, should it really? No, for well-known figures to have security around them. We should all be able to walk down the street, however well-known people are, free from harassment. We live in a law-abiding, free society, and long may that continue. And that's why the police and the justice system do have to take very tough measures when these matters do occur.
Good to see you again, Minister. Thank you very much for your time. Nick Gibb, Schools Minister, appearing here on LBC, where the time is 8 o'clock and the news is next.